The horse that we're going to use today is a K-Line product by Lionel, and it's just the animal figure 4-pack of horse. When you get them, they come as a plain white horse. The first things we're going to put onto our horse are going to be the collar, the back pad, and the breeching strap. You could use a wide variety of materials for this. You could use construction paper, you could use electrical tape. I've chosen to use some leather strip. This comes in 4mm wide and 3/32. Those are the sizes I like the best. And the 3/32 turns out to be about 5 inches wide in O scale, and the 4mm turns out to be about 8 inches wide in O scale. But what we want to do is we want to identify the withers, which is the hump here at the base of the animal's neck and the back. We want to look at the angle of the shoulder, and we want to look at the chest. Now, our collar is going to sit down low on the neck, just at the top of the shoulders. So what we need to do is we need to get our piece so that it's the correct length, so that it sits above the withers here, sits on the top of the shoulder, goes down into the neck of the front of the chest, and then cut that. And when you get that cut, go ahead and glue it onto the animal so that it looks something like that. The most difficult part for me is here on the neck where the two pieces join right in front. I secure mine with super glue, and it's just a little difficult to get that front to close. I'm not too worried about it because we're going to be putting some other things there that'll disguise that gap in a little bit. But let's go ahead and get your collar onto your animal. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the back pad, or some people will call this the saddle. And that sits here on the back of the animal in the trough, the shallow, the depression of the back. Now, the loins are up in this region. We don't want our back pad to get up there, and we don't want it to sit on the withers. We want it to sit right here. Generally, at most of the models, it's at the base of the mane. The back pad is a variety of lengths and widths. I just find I start with mine somewhere about a scale 18 inches or so, and I give it a little cut. We need to just first get it positioned, and I'm going to put just a spot of super glue right there on my animal's back. Just one little touch of cyanoacrylic. And then I'm going to position my saddle right in the middle. I'm going to give this a moment to just kind of cure there. While we're letting that back pad cure on this animal, let's move to another one, and let's look at what the next strap is going to be. And the next strap is called the breeching strap, and this one wraps around the back side of the animal and creates a strap on the back, on the hips, that will keep the wagon from pulling forward if the wagon is going faster than the animal itself. So what we want to do is we want to look for some landmarks for our breeching strap. The breeching strap has to sit low enough on the rump that it doesn't get forced up and over in the case it gets pulled. So it's got to be below this widest, farthest back point on the thigh of the animal. It has to come forward generally to a little bit beyond the widest part of the hip. So somewhere in here, I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to take that farthest back part of the hip over to the widest part, and I'm just going to put a very subtle little mark on this animal there. This is going to define where some of our next straps need to go, and we have to put in our straps before we can put in our breeching strap. Going to the other side of the animal, I find the farthest back part on the rump. I come forward to just about the front of the thigh, and I'll make another mark. I'm going to take a look at these two marks, and I'm going to see if they're basically in the same spot as far as how far forward they go, and if they're at the same height on the animal, and those are pretty good. So that's going to be our location for positioning this breeching strap. Now if I go ahead and I put the breeching strap on this animal, what we find is the tail on this particular model is not too bad. The tail allows the breeching strap to sit right where it needs to. We don't have to modify this tail, but on some of the older Lionel horses or some of the other brands of horses, you may need to take a razor saw and cut up the rump of the animal to free a little bit of this tail up so that this breeching strap can get high enough on the animal. So let's not put that in place yet. And let's go back to our model animal, and let's go ahead and put those marks in. So again, find the farthest back part on the rump. This is going to be the top of the breeching strap. Come forward so that it's just forward on the thigh. Put a little mark. Same thing on this side of the animal. Find the farthest back part, the thickest part of the thigh here on the rump. Come straight forward to just about the front of the thigh. Make another little mark. And I check them now to see that they're the same relative position forward and the same height. And I like those. So now what we're going to do is we're going to begin to do some of the strapping of the animal. I prefer to take my electrical tape and lay it out on some masking tape. The reason is when I cut the thin strips necessary for our straps from the electrical tape, this surface tends to bring up some sawdust. So if I do it on a piece of masking tape, I can lift the electrical tape off the masking tape and the adhesive underneath is still clean. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to lift a strip of my electrical tape. I'll set the rest of mine aside. And here's how I want to begin. The first strap that we're going to do is the hip drop strap, and it comes up to the top of the animal at a place called the spider. But what I want to do now is I just want to lay my electrical tape strap, which this has been cut 3 scale inches wide. I want to lay it right on that mark that we'd made earlier and then press it down so that it stays. With that in place, I'm going to wrap it across the top of the animal and over to our other reference mark. And I'm going to trim it off. So right about here. So this is the hip drop strap. On bigger animals, this strap will often have a partner strap that comes from about halfway down on the side, angles out at about a 45-degree angle, and drops down to support the breeching strap in its midsection. So somewhere right about here. And I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. We'll come to the other side of our horse. We're going to do the same strap. This hip drop strap starts at about halfway, drops at about a 45-degree angle to the top of the breeching strap, and we can cut that off. I see that I've knocked my saddle off, or my back pad, so we'll get that glued back on in a moment. The next strap that we want to put on the animal is called the cupper strap. And what this does is, this is a strap that comes from this region right here. It goes around the base of the horse's tail and comes back up. This provides a loop that becomes an anchor point that keeps all of the harness gear from getting pulled forward. Now, the base of the horse's tail is not as thick as it is on these models. So what we need to do is we need to reduce the thickness at the tail base. And what I've discovered is I just take a chucked drill, a fairly reasonable size, and I'll come to the tail base and I'll just follow the rump of the horse around, and I'll use my drill bit almost like a file or a rasp, and I'll cut a trough in the base of the horse's tail. Clean up your shavings, of course, but now what we want to do, we're going to take another piece of that 3-inch electrical tape, and what we're going to do is bring it up under the horse's tail, and pull it up hard right near the tail base so that it looks something like that. Right there. Then what I want to do is I want to continue with the tape and I want to bring it up and over and intersect that previous cupper that we had. I want to pull both of these tight. so that it goes tightly around the tail base. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off the short part of what we had previously. And now, holding on to the remainder, I want to pull this forward on the horse. I want to bend a little angle in my tape here, and then I want to pull this forward. And now we're at a point where I have to go put that back pad back on. So with the tape secure around the tail and the cupper, what we want to do now is we want to come forward right over the midline and cross over the hip drops right here. So what this will do is this creates a leather joint called the spider right here. The next thing we want to do is keep a little bit of tension on this line, on this strap, and we now want to press it down onto the saddle right there. And I think for appearance, it's really useful to have a gap sitting up here between the spider, which is resting at the top of the hips, and the back pad. There's also going to be a little bit of air showing where this turn back strap, this long strap here, connects to the collar. I find that a spot of super glue on each of these points is really helpful. So I'm going to go off camera and do that now. A spot of super glue here at the spider, a spot of super glue here on the back pad, and a spot of super glue here on the collar. So now with the cupper attached to the turn back strap, secured with a little bit of super glue at the spider, at the back pad or saddle, and at the harness, I now want to just trim this to length. And for now, I'm just going to trim this about the level of the eyes. This is going to be attached to the bridle later. So leave yourself a little bit of working room. So there we have the longest piece of the back of the horse. And now what we'll need to do is we'll need to turn our attention to the underneath side of the horse. To make these neck straps that go under the bottom of the horse, I'm going to lay out a little bit of masking tape for myself. And then what I want to do is I want to get just a rough idea of how wide my horse is at the hips. So I'll just make a little mark in my masking tape on the width extent of each hip. So now what we have is we're going to make a strap that comes from the front edge of the breeching strap, and it goes down along the animal's hip down towards the belly, and it intersects about in the middle of the belly with another strap called the martingale that goes forward, and the martingale attaches to the front attachment point on the drop tongue of the wagon, and it's through this that the energy is transferred from the wagon pulling forward back through the martingale strap to the quarter strap and up into the breeching strap. So what we want to do now is we want to make a Y shape. The martingale strap will be the straight up and down portion of the Y, and the quarter straps are going to go off on either side. So what we'll do is we'll get another piece of my 3-inch electrical tape strips that I've cut. And after doing this on a few horses, I've come to being able to recognize about how much I need. I think that the angle that we're going to try and achieve here is about a 60-degree angle. I'm going to cut this a little longer than the animal because we can always trim off more later. So I'm going to cut my front quarter strap on this side, right about there. I'll make my other quarter strap about here. I then want the martingale strap to go forward from this point. When I first started making these, the quarter straps and the martingale straps were put right up on the animal. There was no sagging or any looseness. So the adhesive on the electrical tape alone was sufficient to keep these in place. But I now want to introduce just a little bit of sag in our quarter straps and our martingale strap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the intersection of these of the Y a little bit, and I'm going to place the tiniest amount of super glue at this joint. And we're going to give that some time to cure. With the quarter strap and martingale strap now cured, I'm going to come over and I'm going to bring one leg of my Y to that intersection point at the front edge of the breeching strap. I'm going to then push the strapping over to the other side of the animal . Run the martingale between the legs. Bring the quarter strap up to that intersecting point at the front of the breeching strap. And one of the things that I notice right away is I have an excessive amount of quarter strap. So I'm going to pull that up until it gives me the kind of fit that I want. Probably about there. We'll turn the animal over. We'll move this quarter strap up as well until the martingale is centered under the animal. I think what I'll do is see if I can grab that end, pull it up, and position it. I think I'm going to like where that is. I'm going to get rid of this extra on the quarter strap by just trimming that end, plucking out the extra. You can see that it has stuck down into the animal's, this is an area called the stifle. And we'll pull that up later. But I think I'm generally pretty happy with that. Now what I want to do is I want to leave enough slop and slack in this martingale strap that it kind of sags a little. So I'm going to put it onto the chest and pull forward until I get the amount of sag I want. So let's go and free up some of these places where the quarter strap has stuck. Trim off the excess here at the breeching strap. Get rid of that. back down into position. Get it unstuck from the stiffle. Work that at both spots. So now you can see I have a little bit of sag in my martingale strap and my quarter straps. That's a pretty good position. The adhesive itself is holding it to the chest, and it's free up here at the collar. And what I want to do now is I just want to put a spot of super glue where the martingale strap attaches to the collar, and then we'll trim off the excess as soon as that cures. With the glue secure, I'm now going to trim off the martingale here at the top of the collar. And we'll save that piece for later. So now we can begin to move to the breeching strap. And again, the breeching strap is going to come under the tail, just below the widest part of the animal's hip, somewhere about there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position this first side of the strap with just a spot of super glue. You want this to be roughly horizontal. So I'll get that positioned. We'll let that cure.